and had doubts, for God's sakes, which way are we going? There were real difficulties showing up. The main difficulties, I think, were caused by, first of all, the feeling that it was necessary to keep up at least somewhat with the military. Bundeswehr in West Germany, the army, was getting all the most modern missiles and tank, all kinds of modern equipment. The GDR couldn't fall too far behind. It couldn't keep up. But this cost billions, and keeping up its army, although much smaller than West Germany, but still for a little GDR it was much too expensive. Second of all, electronics moved in industrially in the world, and the GDR did not have electronics industry, and it could not get it from the Soviets, who were fighting themselves for their military defense, but also for space. Couldn't help. And West Germany, the West in general, was forbidden to help. So little GDR had to try and build up its own electronics industry, which cost billions. And third of all, a huge housing campaign. Honecker, when he became head of the party, promised to have every family have a modern apartment by the time they, by 1990, to have a modern apartment. And that means with modern sanitary equipment, which was not the case before, and a nice apartment. They spent billions to achieve it. It was never achieved, but they did manage to achieve it for between 1 and 2 million families. And this was wonderful for them. Whole new cities arose with all of them with nice schools and kindergartens and clinics where all the doctors were represented that you wanted, and all of it free for the children, for the medical care, dental care, all of it free, for child care, all represented in these new city, either whole cities, but also parts of cities. But this cost billions. And in those three things, I think, broke the back of the GDR economy, and meant, since it lived from export, it had nothing of its own of natural resources. It lived from export. This meant cutting down on imports and stepping up exports, which meant limiting consumer goods. And in these last 4 years, 3 or 4 years, you could feel that the consumer assortment was not improving as it had been up until then. Up until then, the prices have been going down and down, no longer. And this led in great measure to the downfall of the GDR, I think. Nevertheless, until the very end, nobody needed to fear losing a job. Nobody could be evicted from their home. That was illegal, even if they couldn't pay their rent. In the final analysis, if they couldn't pay for a long time, they couldn't be evicted. They could be forced to move to a cheaper apartment. But nobody could be evicted, which meant nobody was lying in the streets, sleeping in the streets, and nobody was begging, which was important. And these other advantages were kept till the very end. And rent, in general, about 1/10 of your pay only. And you couldn't be evicted, as I said. These were advantages which the GDR population took for granted after 40 years. They didn't even think about the fact that they could lose these advantages. But many of them they did. Not all of them, but many of them they did. West Germany had also relatively high because of the competition with the East, in part. But still, in terms of vacation, 3-4 weeks vacation, and half a year maternal leave, paid, a half a year unpaid, but your job was right. Constant rehab cures for nothing, all paid with your pay. All of these things people had come to take for granted here. And I think this was true to an extent in the other Eastern European countries as well. But here it was very sharp because we were right on the border, with West Berlin right in the middle. So that what it meant, boiled down to, as I see it, in the end, was that the system which was built up in the GDR, first of all, had lots of problems and difficulties and mistakes and blunders and careerists who were in it just for themselves. You had people were people; they didn't become angels. Nevertheless, built in with these supports for everybody, that nobody could suffer greatly economically. They were sure of eating. Every place in the country, every job, every school offered you a warm, hot midday meal, which is the main meal in Germany, almost for nothing, for very, very little. So that everybody had enough, everybody was secure, but these other things, that they grew in importance for them because the other they took for granted. I think this meant, in the whole, to sum it up, that the system was basically far better and a good one. But in the end, it was weaker. The other side was simply stronger. The side of the United States, which had never been troubled in the war, and West Germany, which got huge investments from the West and from its own war criminals, and that the West was simply stronger, not better. As in a football game, one team wins and the other loses. Doesn't mean that the one team is morally better, or it just means it's not as good as the other on that particular time. And this was, I'm afraid, the case, that the socialist idea developed for various historical reasons in the poorer part of Germany, in the poorer part of Europe, and in the poorer part of the world. And capitalism was in the wealthier in all three fields. I think that was behind the major change.